Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host Gordon Smith and I'm joined as usual by co-host Jay Shepard. In part 1 we're filling you in on Qantas's Project Sunrise, and in part 2 we find out which European airlines were the most profitable last summer. Hi Jay, how's it going?
Hi, how's it going, Gordon?
Doing very, very well. Speaking about summer, here, even in Lisbon, it does get pretty cold in deepest, darkest November. Summer seems like a long, long time ago, but we've just got the financial results from most of Europe's airlines, the big ones at least. We are recording here on the 24th of November, slightly earlier than normal with the Thanksgiving holidays on your side of the pond later this week. It's just, we've got EasyJet still to come by my list, Jay. Is that right?
Yeah, tomorrow, which is Tuesday, the 25th. So by the time people are listening to this, those EasyJet figures will have already been published. But for us, we're about one day out.
One day out, the calendar gods against us once again. We're going to discuss Europe in part 2, particularly around the profitability. As we said in the intro, part 1, we are going to discuss Qantas because I have just published what is quite a meaty feature, even by feature standards. At Skift, we like to, I think it's one per year on average for our editors, and that looks at all sorts of different areas, not just airlines. We've got hospitality and OTAs and travel technology and everything else. We've got paid in Asia and so on. But for our reporters as well, they tend to do one or two feature stories per year. And it was my time, especially as we're coming up to the Skift Aviation Forum, which is in Fort Worth on December 3rd. We thought, great, let's write something exciting about the airline industry. If you're not familiar with Project Sunrise, it's the code name that Qantas is giving to their ultra long haul flights. And again, you might be thinking, Qantas already fly from Sydney to DFW and from Perth to London. Yes, but this is going even further. This is going to be a specially modified Airbus A350-1000 ULR, and that will be going non-stop from Sydney initially to London and New York, with other routes, depending on your point of view, to follow Melbourne, etc. And yeah, my feature was basically looking at the business case for this. And it is, if you've been wondering, Project Sunrise, they've been talking about that for ages. Yes, it is one of those aviation ideas that's hovered around in the background for years, but it is suddenly becoming very, very real. November 7th, we had some new pictures out of Toulouse, the Airbus factory there. And Qantas is now really only months away from taking delivery of that first specially modified A350, and it's going to be able to fly more than 16,000 kilometers in a single stretch. Like we said before, Sydney to London and New York, around 21 hours, which of course instantly grabbed attention, and that's where a lot of the headlines have been focused on. But I think one of the more interesting sort of sub-stories, if you like, sits behind that headline distance. So I wanted to understand not just how Qantas plans to do it, but why the airline believes the economics hold up. Because even after reaching this point, it has been 2017 at least. So they've been talking about it properly for a decade. And behind the scenes, the Project Sunrise has kind of been a culmination of a century-long Australian ambition to overcome what Qantas executives have called the tyranny of distance. Putting it simply, Australia is quite far away from a lot of major global markets, and they want to be able to soften that out, to make it a little more seamless. But once you peel back the branding, the project sort of becomes a spreadsheet challenge about fuel, weight, and willingness to pay. So I spoke to various different industry stakeholders, including the CEO of Qantas International, Cam Wallace. That did involve a very, very late call my time, or early, depending on your point of view, Jay. I thought, a call with Australia, how bad could it be for me sitting here in Western Europe? And you sort of think, yeah, it wouldn't be great if it was sort of any time after midnight, any time before 6 a.m. Sure enough, it was a 3:30 humdinger, 3:30 a.m. But, but it was worth it. Cam's insights were absolutely fantastic, and having previously worked at Air New Zealand, he's no stranger to overcoming the distance to connect key markets. And it was really an opportunity to speak to the Qantas team about, yes, you've got all this poetic license and everything else. We go into the feature around the reason why it's called Project Sunrise, and that harks back to the seaplane flights during the Second World War. And these were sort of semi-clandestine seaplane flights going in the air for up to 30 hours, so long that the few passengers on board saw the sunrise twice. But yeah, you speak to Cam Wallace, and in Cam's words, they've given the airline, quote, incremental confidence in the economics and crucially in the customer appetite for flying this long. He said the net promoter scores are some of the highest anywhere in the network for those very, very long flights. So, hey, what's another few hours if you're already going all that way? You might think, but a Sydney nonstop is almost a quarter longer than Perth to London. So there are some additional impacts and aspects to consider, Jay. But what say you if you were flying from London to Sydney, Jay, or New York to Sydney? Would you deliberately break up the journey, even if money was no object, or would you say, let's just let's get the journey over and done with in hopefully a bit of comfort, maybe even style?
Yeah, I've thought about that before, and I think I would go for the breakup, if it was a good connection through a good hub like Singapore, Dubai. But I can totally see for some people, some situations, time is money, and if you can get there faster than slower, then the option is going to be a good one for some people. So I don't know. What do you think, Gordon? Are you a connector or a non-stopper?
I'm open to it. I haven't been to Australia in a very long time. I think it was 2010, the last time I was in Australia, and even then, I think it was Western Australia, which, as we've already said, is a good bit closer to many parts of the world. It is worth highlighting that this is going to be complementary to what Qantas already do. So their one stops through Singapore aren't going anywhere, even when Sunrise comes on tap, and they also do have a joint venture with Emirates on certain itineraries going through Dubai. So there will be still elements of what we have today. This is not going to be a one or the other situation, and Qantas has been quite open about that. This is very much going to be an additional option for their customers, those who do want to fly non-stop versus the one-stop options, which will stay there. And if you look at the aircraft, Jay, it's designed with only 238 seats. So if you look at, I think French B and maybe Air Caribbean, they fly the A350-1000 with 450 plus seats in a very, very dense configuration. So to only have 238 on a jet of that size, Qantas is betting heavily that premium passengers will pay more for the time savings, the reduced connection risk. I spoke to a couple of analysts, and they said it's not just the comfort element and everything else. It's also just the fact that there's fewer things that can go wrong if you don't have that tight connection. There's less chance of your bags going missing, etc. It's just one flight, one big flight at that. So you've got elements around that which could weigh in terms of some human behaviors, and you've also got what Vanessa Hudson, the group CEO at Qantas, is promising to be a highly curated onboard experience. So a wellness zone, even for economy class passengers. There's going to be various mood lighting elements and various sort of bespoke features throughout the aircraft. And just getting down to the financials, Wallace did tell me that Qantas is hoping to attract a fair premium, but the exact willingness to pay will only become clear when the flights go on sale. And he said that's usually around 12 months before launch. But the modeling and the experience draws heavily on what they've learned from the Perth market, where those non-stop services, at least based on our Skift research, commands around a 10 to 20% markup versus one-stop options. So I don't think it would surprise anyone to see that similar sort of markup on the new generation of Sunrise flights. But I wasn't just speaking to Qantas for this, as I suggested. We were speaking to various others from Cirium and some academics as well. And I also spoke to some other industry voices from maybe they're not rivals. Sounds a little harsh, but they're commercial competitors. So speaking to some of the Gulf players as well at Etihad and Dubai airports. The CEO of Dubai airports, for example, Paul Griffiths, he was saying that ultra long haul flying is exciting, yes, and it's going to be very glamorous, yes, but it's only going to be relevant to a tiny fraction of travelers. And his view was that the secondary cities and the high density routes are going to continue to rely on hubs, especially as those longer range narrow bodies open up new 9-hour missions. So, and it's important to say that Qantas, for one, is the launch customer in their region for the A321 XLR. They took on a historic flight, picking it up from Finkenwerder in Germany and getting it back to Australia. So they are, if you look at the order book for Qantas, everything they're doing, it's all about stretching both the distance that the aircraft can go, but also sometimes the capacity as well. So a lot going on, Jay. But I would encourage anyone that hasn't had a chance to read it, go to skiff.com. It's on the editor's picks section right now. So I thank you to my commissioning editor for putting it there. So if you can't find it on the homepage, just navigate across to the right hand side, and it's currently there amongst our editor's picks.
And I would also encourage everybody to read it. It's a great article. Good job good job on your end, Gordon. And you asked some very pertinent questions too. You dig into I think what are the the real key aspects of whether or not this ultimately will prove successful, or I'm going to put it in your terms. I smiled when I read this, but it's the this is my I'm going to steal this from you, Gordon. This is the new the Jurassic Park test. Yeah, it's I saw that movie so long ago.
Jeff Goldblum.
The Jeff Goldblum line,
Yeah.
in your article, it's sometimes a question, not so much, and I'm paraphrasing here, but, not so much whether you can do something, but should you do it? And so it is an interesting, more than interesting, it's fascinating that, that Airbus is able to produce a plane that can travel that distance, and, with, as you said, 238 passengers, and, that they can do it in a way that Qantas finds economically attractive. Ultimately, will it actually prove economically attractive? And we'll find out whether you know. Another question is, maybe those maybe five of those planes will prove economically viable, but maybe not 12. That's just I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that's a possible scenario too. That maybe it's too niche that they shouldn't have even bothered with it in the first place. But on the other side, on the other extreme, it could be yeah, where people are just willing to pay for that service, that nonstop, time is money, and I'm willing to willing to pay extra to get there faster. So it's going to be really fascinating to see. And I think what the deliveries you said start late 2026. So I'm guessing, is this a 2027 launch? Does that sound about
Yes, yeah, obviously
yeah,
COVID disrupted the
right?
original timeline, and
Right.
it's been moved around various times since then. But yeah, it's tangible. The progress is tangible, and yeah, if you head down to Toulouse today, you will see an aircraft coming together in its final stages. But a lot of testing, as you would expect, before it's handed over to Qantas, and then obviously they have their own in-house elements to sort out. So we're looking at a 2027 launch, but I think that's reasonably realistic given the relatively few variables that are left in the mix there, Jay. And you're absolutely right. Qantas has ordered a dozen of these specially modified ULRs. So yeah, earlier plans hinted that Melbourne could see the sunrise flights as the project matures. And Cam, he was suggesting to me, it may not be just brand new non-stops. It may be actually this is a great aircraft that we can put on existing flights. So speaking purely in possible example terms. There was no commitments here, but as a possible candidate, he did highlight Sydney to Dallas Fort Worth, which currently operates the route with an A380. The great aircraft, but as we discussed plenty of times on the show, they're not going to be around forever, particularly with the very thirsty four engines. So that may be an example where you could see, as the project matures, the A350-1000 ULR fitting in quite nicely there. So yeah, more on that when we get it, Jay. But Qantas is describing this as the final frontier for commercial aviation in some of their marketing materials, their social media. There are some of the analysts I spoke to, not sure if you agree or disagree, saying, "Oh yes, distance is only one half of the equation. You also do need to consider time as well." So supersonic flight, I'm sure there'll be many are suggesting would be something getting closer to the final frontier. And then there's others who talk about sustainability as well. The jury is still out about how sustainable it all is. You obviously have a higher fuel uptake, because compared to flying on a one-stop service, that Sydney to London, for example, non-stop requires the aircraft to have perhaps a less dense configuration, and in those important early stages of the flight, it will be burning more fuel to carry the remaining fuel needed to complete the flight. But offsetting that, you do have only one takeoff and landing, which is generally less carbon intensive, but perhaps not likely to be enough to cover the penalty of the smaller cabin, etc., per passenger. So lots of nuance, which we get into in the feature. We don't necessarily have time to go into here on the show, but check that out at skiff.com. Anything to add, Jay, before we get into the break?
Well, I don't want to spoil the ending. That's bad form here, but I am going to read the last line of your feature story here, or at least paraphrase it. You're asking ultimately, and I think this is the right question to end on, is whether or not this new ultra super long service is going to become the model for the next century of flight, or whether it remains more of an ultra premium novelty. And that, as you suggest, will only truly be known once the sun rises. Nice way to end that. I like the literary flair there, Gordon.
Thank you, Jay. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening, especially those based in the Asia Pacific, saying, "Hang on a minute, I'm in Singapore. I can already jump on a ULR A350 to both JFK and Newark with Singapore Airlines." Yes, that is the A350-900 variant ULR, if I'm not mistaken, Jay. So it isn't just
Yes.
Qantas that are doing these slightly wacky flights. So whether there'll be any other buyers for the 1000 ULR, I think is an interesting one. But yeah, that remains to be seen. Okay, part two, we are going to be discussing Europe profitability. Obviously, the all important Q3 season is well and truly over. As we said at the start of the show, it's freezing here in Lisbon now, but we do have the important numbers. So we'll get into those in part two. But before that, a quick reminder to send any questions or comments that you might have for us to podcasts@skiff.com. That's podcasts with an S at the end. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can continue to spread the word about the Airline Weekly Lounge. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm Gordon Smith, joined as usual by Jay Shabbat. We're recording here November 24th, Jay, and we're just a few days away now from the Skift Aviation Forum. I didn't get to see you at the Global Forum this year in New York, so I'm particularly excited to be able to see you. And I have noticed an addition to the agenda here. At 8 a.m. on December 3rd at the Sheraton Fort Worth Downtown Hotel, we can start our day with Jay. Tell our listeners what that's all about.
Yeah, sure. I'll be giving a little discussion, leading a discussion on the U.S. airline industry and how that's developing. We'll talk about all the fun stuff going on with all the different U.S. airlines and how they're doing and the prospects for 2026. So, are you going to wake up early to attend that, Gordon, or are we going to have to? We're not going to see each other until after 9.
Well, it's a bit like Christmas, the night before Christmas, the night before Aviation Forum. I can't sleep, so I probably won't have been to bed. I'll be so excited for the day ahead. So yeah, I'll certainly try and swing by if I can. Look forward to
Very
seeing you.
good. Okay, so we'll
Looking
have
forward to seeing many of our listeners. And a quick reminder that last year's event was a sellout. So don't hang around. If you're thinking about joining us, please do go to live.skiff.com. If you're a fully paid up Airline Weekly subscriber, you get one complimentary in-person ticket, but only while supplies last. So don't hang around. And if you're not, then don't worry. Regular tickets are available, but again, only while supplies last. And if you're looking for any additional reasons to join us, starting the day with Jay, I think is certainly one of them. But a all-star cast of fantastic speakers from right across the industry, more C-suites that you can shake a stick at, and plenty to look forward to there, Jay. But let's pivot back to the here and now. We've got still got EasyJet, most of the numbers in from Europe's big carriers. How was Q3 in a nutshell, Jay?
It was good.
It was good. All right, end of the show.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Oh, you want
Thanks.
more detail?
Go on, a little bit more detail.
I'll give you a little more detail. If anyone saw our feature story for the current issue this week of Airline Weekly, one of the main themes is that things are going well for European airlines, more or less. Demand is pretty good, tourism is pretty good, and airline earnings are. I mean, third quarter earnings were excellent. If you combine, so there are 10 airlines, let's call them, yeah, I think we could use the term major airlines in Europe, airlines that have reported their financial results. So these tend to be the publicly traded ones, although I included TAP Air Portugal, which is not publicly traded, but they do publish the results. So in any case, 10 uh, of these European airlines, all the big ones, Lufthansa, Air France, IAG, Ryanair, etc. The collectively, if you add up all their revenues, all their expenses, third quarter operating margin was 18%. So that of course is peak season. Summer. Europe is a very seasonal airline market, as many of you know. So 18% is that shouldn't knock anybody off their seats, but it's very solid. I mean, 18%. And every airline has its own story. Some happier than others, but in general, if you go down the list of all the European airlines that have reported so far, um, it's pretty good story. If you rank them, Ryanair, and this you can see this in the issue as well. We ran a chart ranking the airlines from best to worst, and Ryanair among the European carriers comes out on top, 36% operating margin, fantastic, whatever quarter. And then actually, we pulled out the earnings even within the big airline groupings. So, for example, within IAG, we pulled out Vueling, based in Spain, and they were actually number two at 25%. So Vueling had a great quarter. Norwegian, we'll have to spend more time talking about Norwegian one of these podcasts. If you've read, we've definitely covered it in Airline Weekly. That's been a somewhat, let's call it, unsung turnaround story. Norwegian is doing very, very well, and you'll recall that they started out the decade in bankruptcy. So that's a really impressive turnaround
Com
story.
completely
And
agree, Jay, and
yeah,
Gia Carlson is fantastic. If you get a chance to interview him or speak to him, on the conference circuit or out and about, I had a chance to speak to him last year at the Airlines for Europe, summit, and he was, you could tell that things were starting to head in Norwegian's direction, but there was no room for complacency. He was just so focused, and that's before you consider additional aspects like a sort of resurgent SAS and the integration with Videro and everything else, the various currency fluctuations, Russian airspace. There's just so much going on. But yeah, I was really really impressed with Gear. So Gear, if you're listening, I think I've got your email address, but if you listen to the show, drop us an email. We can get you in and get you interviewed for a future issue of Airline Weekly. That would be great. Maybe a sort of I'm trying to think. Yeah, yeah, it's coming on for 2 years now since we properly spoke last. So overdue, Gear. Give us a call.
yeah, well, that'll be great. I mentioned Ryanair, Vueling, Norwegian at the top three. Now those are all short haul carriers. Then comes Iberia, which of course is more of a long haul carrier, and they were at 24%. Iberia, speaking of turnarounds, that's another amazing one. That one's kind of played out over a little bit of a longer period. That turnaround started about 10 years ago, not five, but they are doing fantastically well. And that has a lot to do with strength in the Latin America to Europe market, and that market is surprisingly just held up extremely well over the past couple years. And there are a few different things that are driving it. And it's hard to know exactly what. There's not hasn't been a whole lot of commentary on why that market's been so good. I suspect one reason is there has been a lot of immigration from Latin America to Spain in particular, probably other places in Europe as well. So I think that's been fueling a lot of the demand, but certainly business demand as well. And then I think very importantly, a carrier like Iberia, true for some other airlines that serve that market as well, finally got the right planes on that market. If you remember, if you go back, probably don't even have to go back this far, but if you certainly go back 10 years ago when Iberia was, still coming out of a very, very lengthy period of difficulties, they were flying, the A340s, and, other airlines were flying just planes that were too large down to either too large or too inefficient down in Latin America. So fleet right sizing has been important in that market. And then I of course won't go down all the entire list here, but I'll just mention one more because kind of segues into something else that I wanted to say. Aegean of Greece had a 23% operating margin, super seasonal airline. But if you look at how they've performed even over the course of 12-month periods, very, just they've done a really, really good job. And here's what I want to say. I was looking, this is using Cirium Dio data here, just the seat capacity that's flying into and out of different airports across Europe. And the busiest airport in the world, or busiest airport in Europe is London Heathrow. In terms of seats, about 12.7 million seats for the upcoming first quarter. So looking at the upcoming first quarter, January to March, and if you compare that to 2019, so we're already going back now several years, but just interesting to look at which airlines changed, uh, to what degree, over that time period. And if you look at if you have to come up with the fastest growing airport in Europe over the past 6 years, 7 years, the answer is Athens. I mean,
Wow.
51%. Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, you can, I'm cutting that off at the top 40 or whatever. I'm just looking at the top ones, because we're talking in percentage terms here. But you have all the sizable European airports. Athens, 51%. That's even, by the way, more than Istanbul, either of Istanbul's airports.
I
So
was gonna say Istanbul is you probably answered the question already, Jay, by saying it's sort of your top 40. I assume Tirana in Albania isn't in that top 40 list.
yeah, well, and that goes back to what I'm saying. You have to sort of cut it off. That's such a small airport that, in percentage terms, Tirana is going to be a. You know what, Gordon? You actually stumped me, and I don't know what is the airport code for Tirana.
TIR.
TIR. Figured you'd know that. Let's see if we can find, they not coming up here. We'll have to look at that separately and I'll report back to you. But that clearly is going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if that's, 900% or something like that. But that's not fair. That doesn't make my list because it's started out from such a small base.
I
But yeah,
also I also give you correct information, Jay. It's TIA.
TIA, okay, maybe that's why I couldn't find it, and there it is, okay, it is up, well, I said, what'd I say, 700%? 211%.
Wow.
But just to give you an idea, there's in the for upcoming first quarter, uh, Tirana Airport will have, just under 7,000 flights into and out of that airport, and Athens will have 25,000, so you can see just a big, but if you cut off, like, just so you know where my cutoff is, if you cut off at about, anyone over any airport over 20,000 seats, Athens is your busiest. You're sorry, your fastest growing over the past, since the 2019 period. So there you go. If you want to look at, it's always interesting to, you could look at different years over the past. If you just look year over year, like what's scheduled for first quarter 2026 versus that same quarter last year, the fastest growing quote unquote big airport is actually Copenhagen. And we did. Do you recall, Gordon? We did. I can't remember if we actually did a podcast on it, but we did a feature story about Copenhagen and why that's been growing. Do you remember that one?
We sure did. Vaughn, our fantastic graphic designer, he had they were like geese that were flying in with the logos of Air France, KLM, and SAS. I remember that illustration for our feature story.
Yeah, yeah, great visual there. And that's the now Copenhagen, if you go back, now versus 2019, the growth hasn't been that much. Uh, what's happened there is SAS went bankrupt. They took out a lot of capacity, and now a lot of capacity is coming back in. And some other airlines as well, I'm sure, but have to look at that more closely. But so Copenhagen, if you're just looking over the past, 1 or 2 years, that is you might say the hottest major airport in Europe.
Absolutely. Thanks for that insight, Jay. Anything to add before I give a plug to the issue last week? If anyone wants to go into more detail and find out a bit more around Q3 for the various airlines, do check out the Airline Weekly issue, which was published today, November 24th.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, one other theme everybody should pay attention to is, and this is nothing new, but I kind of joke how in some areas of the Middle East they maybe love their airlines too much. Saudi Arabia just ordering, just hundreds and hundreds of airplanes and launching new airlines and just so much growth and so much investment in airport. They, arguably. maybe love their airlines there too much. In Europe, it's a question of, do they love their airlines enough? Because particularly in countries like Germany, France, Netherlands is the big one. I think we've talked about that last week or whenever it was we talked about KLM. They're What's interesting, and read the feature story if people get a chance, but um, I want everybody to appreciate that in Europe, just because of the nature of these low cost carriers like Ryanair and their business models, governments can essentially turn off and on demand like a switch. If they, what happens is they'll lower taxes, they'll lower fees, they'll, whether it be the airport fees or the, just aviation taxes or environmental taxes, whatever they are. And they can just lower them overnight. Ryanair and Wizz Air and some of these other guys, they'll just, okay, well, we're just going to add seats and, we're happy to charge really, really low fares for them and you'll get traffic growth. Whereas it almost doesn't even matter the market. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. It's it's almost like you can turn whatever airport you are. I mean, as long as you have some degree of demand, you can basically turn it on and off with a switch. Now, a lot of governments have opted to turn it off, and you can see why that might be so. If you're sitting in the Treasury Department of in France, and you have a huge budget deficit, and you're looking for places to collect revenue, you can see why aviation might be a ripe source for that. But at the same time, the airline traffic can be an economic stimulant. So you could, there's a lot of governments that are they're opting to do the opposite and lowering their taxes to try to stimulate demand, stimulate the economy, and hopefully generate economic activity and even government revenue that way. And different airline, you can go, country by country. Germany now, interestingly enough, I mean, they really squeezed the airline industry hard over let's say in the post COVID period. And Germany has been one of the worst performing airline markets in the world since 2019. I mean, it's just incredible how little that market has grown compared to some of these other markets like Greece that we talked about earlier. Germany is now, however, backtracking a bit, and next summer they're actually going to lower their aviation taxes. Now, our friend Mr. O'Leary said basically, in more or less that thank you very much, but it's not good enough. You got to go further. Ryanair will never be happy, but nice to see from an airline perspective. Anyway, I mean, I'm not taking any position on whether or not I'm not making any commentary on what's right or wrong in terms of the fiscal management for the German treasury, but in terms of airlines and the European aviation sector, it is nice to see that Germany and some other countries as well, Sweden comes to mind, have been lowering their aviation fees.
The carrot and the stick, Jay. We could discuss the pros and cons for hours and hours, but our time is sadly up for this week's show. A quick reminder of the Skift Aviation Forum. It's not too late to get a last-minute ticket as we are currently recording here. Can't guarantee that will be the case by the time you actually listen to it, depending on when you're listening to it. But as it currently stands, live.skift.com is where you need to go for all the latest details, information, and to secure your seat. We look forward to seeing you in Fort Worth on December 3rd. Megna will be there as well, as Sharp from our research team, and plenty of other colleagues from across the Skift ecosystem, not to mention lots of industry stakeholders as well. And a quick reminder as well that as an Airline Weekly subscriber, you get access to all the airline news on skift.com, plus Skift Researchers Airline Reports. Go to airlinweekly.com/subscribe for a complimentary trial issue to find out what all the fuss is about. Okay, thanks for that, Jay. Nice Qantas and Europe discussion covering both sides of the globe. Thanks to Jay for joining me this week, and thanks as always to our producers, Monica and Will, and wherever you are in the world. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skiff channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.